Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how you can build a glitch effects sequencer in Effects Grid. Here's an example of this patch processing an amen break. Here's the dry amen. And here's this amen break being processed by this patch. So yeah, these kind of this kind of device has been around for a while. This is very influenced by this thing, dblue glitch. This is just a picture of it. I can't load the plugin anymore because I recently switched from Windows to Mac. But there's been a lot of these kind of devices over the years. This was probably the most popular and most used one. But after this one, there was Effectrix, and then there was the one from Isotope, and then there was a handful of reactor ensembles that did kind of similar things, some of the Twisted Tool stuff. And then there's some newer ones I haven't used. There's like Infiltrator, and there's also a newer version of this that I think works on Mac also. And honestly, I don't really use these kind of plugins. I used to use this one a long time ago, but I haven't really used these things in years. But anyway, I kind of had the idea that maybe it would be cool to build one in Effects Grid because it would be fully customizable. Because rather than being limited to whatever the effects are that it provides you, you can customize it and put whatever effects you want into the slots and just use it as a way to sequence the different effects. So the way I have this one going is that it's basically just a container device that allows you to put different effects inside of these effect slots and sequence between them. So, it's a way that you can create your own custom glitch sequencers, so as opposed to just having whatever ones are included in a plugin. So that's kind of why I decided to make this patch. So yeah, we're going to build this thing from the ground up. I'm not sure if I'm going to include all the features right now. I wanted, at least in this first video, just get the basic the basic structure working for you to have this effect set up that's run off this. So I'm going to quickly give you an overview of what the features are in here, and then we'll get into building it. So, okay, so I'm going to first turn all this stuff off, or at least I'll turn off the top row. So what I have going on the top row is stutters, beat, repeat, retrig, whatever you want to call it. I've done a couple tutorials on these kind of things before, so I don't even know if I'm going to get into it on this video, although this one does work a little bit differently than the last tutorial, than the last version of this kind of thing I had on a tutorial. I've got it working a little bit better. But what this does is you can just draw in stutters for any step, and the higher this goes, the faster the stutters are. And then the way it works is that what's up here determines what is going to get repeated. So like there's a snare over here, so if I just draw these, then it's just going to be the snare repeating. And then, no matter how many repeats there are. And then, I could, for example, then have the kick repeating over here. And then anywhere where I add in a point over here, that will also get repeated. All right, so I wonder if that's too loud compared to how I'm talking. Maybe I should turn this down a little bit. I'm just going to turn it down. All right, hopefully that's not too loud over my voice. So then down here, this red column over here is time stretching. This is still very rough. I'm kind of still working on trying to figure out how to get time stretching to work well in Effects Grid. There is no like granular effect mode in Effects Grid, so it's kind of hard to get it to sound good. I'm doing this with recorder devices, but you can see an example of it working right here. So the way I have this set up is that so it works kind of similar to the retrig. So up here decides at what point time stretching starts, and then down here these are different time stretching presets. So you can hear this. And then I have like basically these different presets that have like either different grain size or different stretch amount. And it's not really grain size, it's kind of like a mock granular. And then I have some sort of like really weird ones up here. So like this is kind of a rough more time stretch. So that one was, the first ones you heard were double. This one should be 4 times. All right, so that's kind of a rough time stretch. And again, yeah, that part of it is still in work. So I will do a tutorial on the time stretching at some point, but for this one I'm just gonna do the effects and maybe get into the retrigs. So the effects is up here. So what happens, you can see now if I draw these in, so over here you have 24 steps on here. I think there might be 25, but from here to here is 24. So each of these steps has a corresponding modulator down here. So this is connected to these 3 Parsi gates, because these give you 24 modulators. And then on top of that, what it does is it subdivides it into these effects, depending on this knob over here, which is number of effects. So it allows you to go between 1 and 6 effects. So with this setting of 6 effects, what happens is that you get 4 different parameter snapshots inside of each of these 6 effects. Okay, so like you can see, these first ones are over here are going to be pitch shifters. Oh, that one's drive. There's pitch shifter. All right, and then these ones up here are going to be comb, filters. And then I have bit crushers up here. All right, so you get the point. And so the way I have this set up is that this thing, number of effects, will decide how many effects are in use. So if it's over here, there's only 1, and all 24 snapshots will be within 1 effect. If it's here, it's going to be 2, so the bottom 12 will be 1 effect, and the top 12 will be another effect. And you can see that down here if you look at this effect selector. If we have it at 3, you can see it's going to subdivide it into 3. And so then we'll get 8 divided into 8 snapshots within each of these 3. If it's over here, we'll get 6 snapshots within 4 effects. So it makes it pretty customizable. Yeah, so basically you can just insert effects into these containers over here, or into these containers. You can insert effects, and then just use these modulators to create different variations on them. And that's pretty much the idea. So within this patch, I have the time stretch and the stutter as separate effects grid patches. And then I've done a few different versions of this. Some I've done it not with the effects selector, but just with a regular, like a effects chain, or just a regular group, where the different steps would just mute or control a wet dry for different effects instead of doing the effects selector. But either way works. It's actually a little bit easier to get all this stuff working with the number of effects using the other method, but this way works. I decided to just switch it to effects selector right when this new Bitwig 5.2 beta came out, because I saw that they added fades into the effects selector, so I wanted to see how that would affect it. This project I made over a year ago, and honestly I haven't actually used it that much. I kind of forgot about it, and I was recently going through some of my effects grid patches and decided to revisit this, kind of clean it up a little bit. I haven't used it since I cleaned it up. I cleaned it up about a month ago, and then or maybe even a couple of weeks ago, I cleaned this thing up. and I haven't really used it yet. So these effects that are in here are kind of rough. I just sort of threw them in to test the whole thing out. So it's not like the coolest sounding settings yet, but yeah, it works. So yeah, so I guess we can get into building this thing. Let me see if there's there anything else that's important. Oh yeah, let me explain how the sequencer works. So one thing that's good to keep mind of with effects grid is it's nice to have sequencers match the transport right. So like you can see this, I want this one to hit at the right point. This one. I don't know why. Oh, we're not hearing that because it's playing in the middle of a time stretch. All right, so you get the point. You want it to line up, and the reason I'm mentioning that is a lot of the time when there's like timing issues in the grid, you would use a reset module to make sure that all the phases start right. But if you do that on the main phase within here, then what would happen is no matter where you hit play, the sequencers will all start at 0. So then it ends up not really working well because you want the effect to match up, especially so you can like hone in on certain segments of time to work on the settings. And then I have rate control just to be able to slow down or speed up the sequencers. And then I have over here let me just draw on something so we can hear differences. All right, so then I have over here a length control. So what this is going to do is just decide if one of these is playing or if two. Or 4. Or all 8 if we put this up here. Okay, so yeah, that's the general overview of what's going on in here. I've got one other thing. This is a sequencer that just changes the rate. This goes slower than the normal phase and allows you to change the rate. I'm not going to get into that. Let's just start building. Let's just start building this thing. Yeah, okay. So let's load up an effects grid. And then let me just see what was the timing that I had on here. So it looks like it was 4 bars, and then that was running into there 8/1. I had a very slow setup for that. 4 bars, 8/1. That's controlling that. All right. Or no, this is controlling retrigs. I just want to see what do I have everything controlled by. All right, I'll figure all that out. So let's just start making something. So let's go to a transport. And I'm going to set this to 4 bars. Maybe I'll put a display over here just so we can see what the main phase is doing. And one thing I like to do is just mute the phase when the transport is not playing. So to do that, I'm just going to run this into the lower input of a select and have this here. Let me turn down the volume of this. All right. So now what I'm going to do is just set up 8 sequencers. And obviously this part is kind of like however you want to run it. This is just what I like to do because I like to be able to, it just helps me to see where I am in the sequence. Because unfortunately you can't like color code sections of these data modules or color code specific notes. So it makes it sometimes hard to tell where you are in the sequence. I mean, they slightly change the colors on these, but it's just, I find it kind of hard to tell. So that's why I decided to just use 8. Um, for now, so this video doesn't get long, I'm not even going to add rate control and length control. I just want to get the basic structure working, and then I can follow it up to make all the kind of improvements. But I've already did enough talking, and this video is going longer than I was hoping. So let's put this at 8. This will run into here. This will be controlled by the main phase. Then we'll run 8 of these. I'm going to put this up 1 octave. And let's duplicate this so that we have 8 of them. And now let's lay these out. All right, let's run these into here. And let's just make sure that these sequencers are playing in order like they should. Let me make sure if I start at another point, if they play right. All right, yeah, so that's all working fine. Again, yeah, we'll add length and rate controls later. For now, I just want to get the main idea. We can close this because we're just working on this now. All right, so let's get a value readout, and I want to see what are the values that this thing puts out. It goes from 0 to 0.2. We want this to be 0 to 1, so we're going to multiply it by 5. Okay, so now this is giving us the right values. All right, so this will control the Paraseq 8 modulators. So let's load those in here. Let's set these to hold. I'm going to put the mix on 0. And let's duplicate this so we have 3 of them. So now we're going to want to multiply this by 3 because this is going to go 3 times. So we could just multiply this by 15, but I think we're going to want this value later. So I'm just going to add a separate multiply and do by 3. Get a modulator. I'm just going to call this P801. Or P81. Let's get a bias. Run it here. Run another one here. duplicate these. I'm going to call this P8-2, P8-3. Run these into each other. And then these are going to control the phase of these parsec 8s. So I'm going to put the first one here at 100. I don't know why that didn't get at exactly 100. I think, oops, puts that 1. I think we're going to want to set all these to positives. I'm going to assign this one to phase modulation over here. I don't actually remember if these need to be on positive. We'll see. Run this to this one. And now let me see, does this do what it's supposed to? So it's doing what it's supposed to on the first one, but then for some reason it's not on the ones after that. Let me see, why is that? One. Oh, this one needs to be on positives. And let's see now, does that work? And that seems to work. Okay. Yeah. 2, 3. Just want to make sure each one is working correctly. Yeah. All right. And then we're also going to want to have modulators that turn these on. So oops. We can set this to 3, put it on nearest. I'm just going to run a 1 into here and control this by here. And now these will turn on each of these. And the reason we want to do that is that we don't want 2 of these modulators to be playing at the same time, because we don't want if we didn't turn these off, then what would happen is this would cycle through the first one and it would get stuck with modulator number 8 being active. And we don't want that, so that's why we're turning these off when one of these isn't active. I'll call this P1 on. P2 on. P3 on. We'll sign these. All right. So let's make sure that works. All right. So that works. And they're off when they're there. Okay, cool. So we can just call this the parsec 8 section. For now, we can basically say this is done until we start adding other features later. But I'm just going to label this. All right, so now let's add an effect selector. Into here. And then let's just get an effects layer. What am I doing here? I'm just gonna. All right, I'm gonna create 6 layers. All right. And now I don't remember if it's just as simple as assigning that to here. Let me see, because I remember I had some issues with them lining up, but that might have only been when I had multiple numbers. It's pretty simple when you're doing 6. So let's see if we can just run it like this. Let's see, does that work correctly? 2, 3, 4. See this, so this is not working correctly. So if you notice, it's slightly shifted. It's not happening in the right place. And that's because if you look over here, this modulation is actually set to 5. And that's because it starts off modulating within 1. So the whole thing is going to be a little bit off. Normally I would basically, it's not hard to just fix this with some logic and a little bit of math stuff. But what I might do, just to show you if you're somebody that just doesn't like to use logic or math or whatever, and you don't want to have to like think about what are the numbers, and you want just an easy way to do it that's also going to work for the different numbers, one little trick you could do is just simply use a data module like steps. And you could say, for example, so like we could assign this to here so that excuse me. So assign that to there so that as we move through these, we'll have these different states. And so okay, we want to turn this off if this is out of the range, but we can deal with that in a second. So let me see, if we were to set this to 6, would this work correctly? Because so if this doesn't work correctly, then we could just set it to 24 and get each of the steps to work exactly how we want it. And again, this is usually not how I would do this, but it might be a little bit easier than actually, making the adjustments to the math. So let me just get this down over here so we can see what we're doing. So yeah, so if you look now, we can actually see this is happening at the wrong place. If you look down here, we want it to switch over because we're subdividing by 6. So what we want is that layer 1 to switch over to layer 2 over here. So what we could do is just draw these in to make sure that this is all working correctly. And one thing I want to see, are these in sync with each step? These are in sync with each step. So yeah, so this trick should work. We should be able to just draw. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then up here, go to the next state. So layer 2. Oh, whoops. I forgot to change the modulation. This thing is still sending to there. Okay, whoops. So I'm going to drag this modulation and put this onto here. That might have actually been why we needed to do all these 6. But anyway, this setup, if you use this, then you can easily adopt this for the other, for if you add the different options for number of effects. You can do that with math, but this kind of makes it easy, especially for once you start doing something like 5, because 5 doesn't subdivide well into 24, and so you have to kind of figure out where exactly you want each step. So this method with using the data module can end up kind of making that simpler. So, and then you can just see exactly where each step is hitting. All right, so that works. So if you decide to do this method, then you can easily switch it for the different numbers of effects by just having, like, for example, 5 of these and just running them into merge modules. Here, I'll just show you. So what we can do is just call this number effects. So now I'm going to move this modulation that's over here onto here. And then what we could do is just duplicate this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Run these into here. And then this could be controlled by the number of effects knob. So that's kind of an easy way to get that going. I'm not going to bother entering in all these values now because you can basically figure that out. That's simple enough to do. And then yeah, then you can basically just insert effects into here. One thing though, so chain. If we put a chain inside of each one, one thing I might recommend to do would be to have each one turn off and on the mix control on here. And that's because of the way that the effect selector works. The way the effect selector works, when you switch to one effect, the previous effect might still ring out. So like if you had a reverb or a delay on one of them and then you switch over to another effect, the reverb or the delay is still going to ring out. And like I mentioned before, I think I mentioned that I've done a couple different versions of this. When I was first doing this project, I wasn't using an effect selector. I just had a general effects layer, and each layer I just had the mutes being assigned or the wet dry. But if you want to have each one of these turn off and on these effects, you can set that so that basically whenever a certain chain is active, it'll turn off and on the mix, so that the mixes are totally dry whenever that specific chain isn't playing or that specific effect isn't playing. But that's easy enough to set up, so you can do that. And that's, maybe I'll leave it here. This is basically the overall setup. So you can see now, if we go through here, we're going to have these parameter locks, and it's going to scroll through these different effects. And so then what you can do is just whatever effects you put inside of here, you're going to have. So with this current setup where we're dividing it by 6, these first 4 modulators can be used to create 4 snapshots within the first effect. Okay, and then you'll see, and then when we get into the second effect, we'll have these 4 modulators that can be used to create 4 snapshots within that second effect. And so then it's just kind of up to you, whatever effects you want to use and the snapshots you want to create, and it becomes just a customizable kind of sequenced effect thing. All right. Yeah, I'll probably follow this video up with adding the other improvements to the sequencer, and then the next steps and stuff. I could do retrigs again, but I've already done videos on that. So yeah. All right, cool. Thanks for watching. Bye.